President and the First Lady that they'll have a speedy recovery.
President Donald Trump and First Lady Melania Trump test positive for the coronavirus. What impact will that have on the country, the election, and the upcoming debate? We'll have expert analysis. Plus, we ask you what you think. Hello and welcome to News On. I'm Miranda. Thank you so much for joining us. Of course, the big story today, President Donald Trump and First Lady Melania Trump announced early this morning that they have both tested positive for COVID-19. The announcement came just hours after Hope Hicks, one of the president's top aides, also tested positive for COVID. White House aides have called Trump the most tested man in the country. The president and his opponent, though, have sparred over COVID-19. Here's their most recent exchange for the first presidential debate.
Time you see him, he's got a mask. He could be speaking 200 feet away from it. He shows up with the biggest mask I've ever seen.
Several of the president's upcoming scheduled events are now canceled, including a rally in Florida. In a tweet, the president said he and Mrs. Trump will begin their quarantine and recovery process immediately. U.S. President Donald Trump's White House doctor, Navy Commander Dr. Sean Conley, has issued a statement saying that the president will continue carrying out his duties without disruption after contracting the coronavirus. Conley also says the 74-year-old president and the First Lady are both well at this time, and they plan to remain home within the White House during this time. White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows tells the media that the president is experiencing mild symptoms. He made that announcement just a short time ago. Meanwhile, support continues to pour in for the president and First Lady. Vice President Mike Pence, who has tested negative for the virus, sent out this tweet. Pence says that he and his wife, Karen Pence, are sending their love and prayers. Both the Biden campaign and Nancy Pelosi also released statements. In a tweet this morning, Biden said that he and his wife send our thoughts to President Trump and First Lady Melania Trump for a swift recovery. We will continue to pray for the health and safety of the president and his family. The head of the World Health Organization, the German government, and the Russian president joined leaders from all around the globe today, wishing a speedy recovery to the U.S. A spokesperson for German Chancellor Angela Merkel used Twitter to wish the U.S. presidential couple a full and speedy recovery from the virus. The Kremlin released an official statement saying this: "I'm sure that your inherent vitality, good spirits, and optimism will help you cope with the dangerous virus." British Prime Minister Boris Johnson, who was hospitalized for a week in April after he contracted COVID-19, sent his best wishes during an interview this morning.
Well, obviously, I think we all want to send our best wishes to the President and the First Lady, and I've done that this morning, as you can imagine.
And for much more on this breaking development, we want to head out to our Washington, D.C. bureau and check in with Just the News correspondent Carrie Sheffield. Carrie, obviously this is big news. We have also received reports that Republican Chair Ronna McDaniel has also tested positive for the coronavirus, while the president's youngest son, Barron, thankfully has tested negative. How are people reacting in the nation's capital to this news?
Sure, Miranda. Well, we're seeing across the board different reactions. Everyone from, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi has been quite scolding, saying basically that the president had a brazen invitation, according to her words, that the president should have been using more masks, more social distancing, sanitizer, etc., when he was having his rallies, or as he likes to call them, protests against stupidity. And then you have Chuck Schumer. He issued a statement saying that he was praying for the president and for the First Lady, but also saying that any contacts, he called for strict contact tracing for the president. He also said that Amy Coney Barrett should be tested, and any contact tracing with her if she's found positive. You have folks who are, critics of the president. There was a very, I have to say, classy statement from Rachel Maddow, who is a host from MSNBC, urging people to pray for the president and wishing best wishes for the family. On the other side, you also had some folks from the left as well being really quite cruel. Yet there was a former Hillary Clinton staffer who said She has now tried to delete the tweet, but it is seen around the world, screenshotted around the world, saying that she essentially wished that the president dies because of the coronavirus. So certainly reactions across the board. And as you mentioned, across the world leaders pouring in with their support. The Prime Minister of India, Modi, has issued a statement of support as well. And we've heard also that the Prime Minister of Russia, or President Vladimir Putin of Russia, has sent a telegram to issue his goodwill to the president. And he said in the telegram, reportedly, "We wish you the best. We know that you have a lot of vitality and you have a really good spirit and good spirits and a lot of high energy. So we think this will get you through it."
Carrie Sheffield joining us live from our D.C. bureau with Just the News. And be sure and catch out Carrie's new show here on Real America's Voice that airs from 9 o'clock to 10 o'clock Eastern. Thank you so much for joining us. As we mentioned before, a Florida campaign rally for President Trump is now canceled again after he tested positive for the coronavirus. We always try to bring that to you live here on Real America's Voice. Joining us now is our very own Amanda Head. She's joining us live from Orlando, where that rally was supposed to take place. I know it's very bright out there, so we understand the sunglasses. Real quickly, Amanda, how were the president's supporters? Because we know that they line up for hours to hear the president speak. How are they reacting to the president and First Lady being diagnosed with COVID?
Yeah, so obviously President Trump supporters across the country, but where we are right here in Florida, you see Orlando proper behind me. That rally was set to take place about 30 minutes outside of downtown Orlando in Sanford, Florida, at the airport there. This state is very hot right now, both weather-wise. I'm getting a nice tan in the Sunshine State, but also politically. President Trump coming here hoping to snatch up those 29 electoral votes. People here, I can imagine, are very, very disappointed, especially since this is the first spot that, of course, is canceled for the president's tour. Pardon me, it is very windy up here. I guess it's kind of neutralizing the heat just a little bit. But President Trump, he will not be here, but it seems like his supporters are hoping that he might revisit if President Trump finishes his quarantine. He's healthy and strong and tests negative for multiple tests in a row. There's always a chance that President Trump will try to come back here because he doesn't want to disappoint his supporters, of which he has many around here.
I'm sure he does. Amanda Head joining us live in Orlando, Florida. Thank you so much for that report. Still ahead here on this edition of News on the President and First Lady Melania Trump, again, testing positive for COVID-19. So now what? What are the health implications of this? What are the political implications of this announcement? We're going to break it all down coming up after the break when we have our panel of doctors joining us. We're also going to hear from you because we here on Real America's Voice love to hear your voice. We'll be right back. And welcome back to News On. I'm Miranda Khan with news breaking overnight that President Donald Trump and the First Lady have tested positive for coronavirus. There are a lot of unanswered questions as we wade into uncharted health territory, if you will. To try and help us answer some of these questions, I'd like to welcome in our first panel of the day. We're pleased to be joined live by Dr. Richard Bartlett. He's practiced medicine in Texas for over 28 years and served on former Governor Perry's healthcare task force. Also with us live is Dr. Nan Hayworth, a physician and former Congresswoman for New York's 19th Congressional District. Thank you both so much for joining us here on News On. Dr. Hayworth, you served as a member of Congress for a number of years. How do you think this announcement will impact Congress?
Well, in the immediate day-to-day, Miranda, it will have no effect, obviously, but clearly it intensifies the politics. Obviously, it's a more charged environment. And what they're working on now, of course, is a greater relief package, because this certainly brings home the fact that COVID-19 continues to stalk the nation. The president has been rightly an advocate for returning to life as normal, as fully as we possibly can, so that we can get the economy going. And I think, both sides are going to try to use his diagnosis and his fortitude as he faces it in advancing their respective sides of the argument about how much we should be spending on relief versus opening up the economy, which is what we really ultimately need to do.
Dr. Bartlett, you've treated patients who have been diagnosed with COVID throughout this pandemic. What advice would you give the president and the First Lady if you were his White House physician? Again, they're both saying they will remain quarantined for the next 10 days. What advice would you give? Because the president, according to the CDC, does fall into that territory. He is 74 years old. It has been known that people over the age of 70 are more likely to contract the virus. Your thoughts?
So I would say, Mr. President, we're not helpless or hopeless. We're not painted into a corner. I know of 1,000 patients just in West Texas that have been treated with a protocol using budesonide, and it's listed at budesonideworks.com. It's an inhaled steroid. 0 of my patients have died using that treatment, and many of them had comorbidities, cancers, lymphoma, thyroid disease, open heart surgery, 50-year history of smoking, and they've all recovered. And so, Mr. President, be encouraged. There are things that can be done. Early treatment works.
Dr. Hayworth, your reaction to that? Again, the president says he will remain quarantined. We did hear from his White House Chief of Staff, Mark Meadows, speaking to the press earlier today, saying that the president is experiencing mild symptoms. What do you have to say, and what advice would you give him and the First Lady? Again, if you were the White House doctor.
Well, Miranda, I agree with Dr. Bartlett that the prognosis is much in the president's favor. Patients over the age of 75, over the age of 70, have a 94.6% chance per the CDC of surviving COVID infection with no further consequences, essentially. And prescribers should have the freedom to prescribe medications off-label, like budesonide, which is an inhaled steroid. Certainly hydroxychloroquine may come into the mix. President has said he has taken it before. And I have great confidence in his doctors to do the right thing for him and the nation. Note well that although he is, mildly overweight and 74 years old, he is otherwise robust. He does not have metabolic syndrome. He does not have diabetes. He does not have hypertension. Those are two crucial markers for vascular and pulmonary complications of COVID-19 that he does not have. And that, too, is a very hopeful thing for all of us.
Dr. Bartlett, for several months now, there has been a lot of confusion, if you will, when it comes to COVID-19. Again, there's still a lot we don't know. We're learning new information every day, but I have heard from a number of our viewers that have said that they've received false positives. Have you experienced anything like that as well?
So there is a lot of confusion concerning the testing. There are false negatives, false positives. That happens with every testing, but we've had a lot more controversy with the COVID testing. And so the key is, like my colleague, Dr. Ralph Abraham, who's a U.S. congressman from Louisiana, says, you go by treating the symptoms, you don't treat the patient. Symptomatology is how you deal with COVID. If someone has a positive, then we deal with it appropriately. But again, doctors treat patients, they don't treat tests. And so if someone has a positive test, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to have a serious disease state. And on the backdrop of other nations, looking at like Taiwan, 24 million citizens and only 7 have died during this whole pandemic, evidence that early treatment and one of the tools that they're using is inhaled steroids are effective. That should encourage the president and our country.
Dr. Bartlett, I also want to ask you this, because there's also been some criticism that certain deaths that have been attributed to COVID-19 aren't necessarily, I hope I'm phrasing this right, are from COVID-19, if you will. That it could be because of cancer, it could be because of a heart attack, but if there was any inkling that this person had COVID-19, it was automatically counted as a COVID-19 death.
Yeah, we have a state senator, Jensen, who is also a physician, and he's had a great deal of controversy because he's uncovered exactly what you're talking about. There's been a bias sometimes to make sure that COVID is included on the death certificates, and so there's a lot of controversy, and some of that's deserved. I think the numbers are moving all the time back and forth.
Dr. Hayworth, I'd like you to weigh in on that as well.
Yes, in this pandemic, and it's throughout the world, and certainly, the United States has had an exponentially increased amount of data to deal with versus the usual that the CDC and our agencies have to deal with. And state health agencies, we're relying on local authorities, Miranda. We're relying on local and state health authorities to make these determinations. There's a lot of death of COVID that probably is death with COVID and not actually due to COVID. But all that considered, it's also true that if folks have underlying predisposing, especially vascular conditions like metabolic syndrome, diabetes, hypertension, marked obesity, then COVID could be just the factor that puts them over the edge into a fatal condition. So we can't ignore that either. But the good news is that we don't have to. We have a whole therapeutic armamentarium developed, as Dr. Bartlett has spoken of, to help reduce morbidity and mortality. And indeed, we have seen that even though the virus, which changes strains, it does mutate, the current strain seems to be more contagious, but actually has not been associated with a spike in morbidity or mortality. And that is probably due to certain factors inherent to the virus, and also to the fact that we know better how to manage these patients. All good news.
Dr. Bartlett, Dr. Hayworth, we're running out of time, but real quickly, the president has been mocked, if you will, for not wearing his mask enough. This is, again, I'm playing devil's advocate. This is according to people on the left, but we've also heard criticism that wearing a mask could actually be harmful. Your thoughts, real quickly, Dr. Bartlett, we're running out of time, 30 seconds. Mask, are they helpful or not?
When you have Anthony Fauci say, we're going to wear these masks as a symbol that we're in this together, I think that says a lot. And masks are made to keep bacteria out of surgical wounds. Viruses are much smaller. Like Simone Gold says, it's like putting a chain link fence around your yard and expecting to keep mosquitoes out. It's just not a good strategy. There are other strategies of early treatment and effective therapies with like the inhaled steroids that work.
All right, we'll have to leave it there. Doctors, thank you both for joining us. Hope to have you back on again on News On. Thank you very much. Have a great weekend. Stay healthy. Still ahead on News On. We know what doctors are now saying about the president's diagnosis, but what about his political advisors? We're going to talk to 2 campaign strategists after the break about what this could mean for the 2020 campaign. Again, we are just a few weeks away from what's supposed to be the second presidential debate. We'll be right back. Welcome back to News On. I'm Miranda Khan. As the nation grapples with the news that the president and first lady have now tested positive for COVID-19, there are real world implications of their diagnosis. None more so than, of course, his re-election campaign. For more on the political implications of this story, I'd like to welcome in our next panel. We're pleased to be joined by two people who are very familiar with our viewers, former Obama campaign advisor Robin Biro and Trump 2020 Advisory Board member Pastor Darrell Scott. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us here on News On. Pleasure to have you back on again.
Thank you, Miranda.
God bless you.
Pastor Scott, let's start here with you. You have spent quite a bit of time with the president and first lady recently. I have to ask you, have you yourself been tested?
I haven't been retested. I was tested the day of the debate. I tested negative. I don't feel any symptoms or anything like that, but I do plan on getting retested since the president has tested positive.
Robin, obviously this has everyone asking a lot of questions, many of which we don't know the answers to. We know that the president is experiencing mild symptoms, that he plans to be quarantined for the next 10 days, both him and the first lady. But we are just days away from the second presidential debate. COVID-19 has been an issue that has been working relatively in favor of the president's opponent, Vice President Joe Biden. What do you anticipate? And again, nothing is a for sure thing, but do you think the debate will go on as scheduled, especially considering he's supposed to be quarantined?
Miranda, first and foremost, I just want the president healthy, and my thoughts and prayers go out to he and the first lady. And their health has to come first. It's not nearly as important as this debate. And we can move this thing to a digital format if they still both wanted to do this, but he's got to stay healthy. We want him healthy as Democrats because we still feel that we can win this thing. The polling, everything looks pretty good in our favor, so we want him in his best health so that we can win this fairly.
You know, going back to that, I hear what you're saying, and there's been a huge outpour. Biden's campaign sending thoughts and prayers with the president and first lady, but Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi, her statement was a little different. I just want to get your reaction to it. We had Just the News correspondent Carrie Sheffield joining us earlier. What is your reaction to what the Speaker of the House had to say? Was it an appropriate response to this announcement?
I haven't seen her response. I saw an interview with her somewhat after that. But Biden's response was perfectly okay. I've seen, in the vast majority of everything has been very positive. But look, I know I'm on with a pastor. God helps those who help themselves. And God wants you healthy, but he wants you to take care of yourself too. So please wear a mask so that we can be healthy, so that you can be healthy.
Pastor, I'd like you to respond to what Robin just said.
Well, let me address Nancy Pelosi first. She ran true to form with her crude comments. I mean, I'm going to be honest, I'm not surprised she would resort to some underhanded statements like that. And, you know, she's running true to form. That's Nancy Pelosi. That's the Nancy Pelosi that we know. She's crude, she's crass. She's not a nice person, as the president said, and she's actually somewhat gloating in this. And it's just, you know, that's just a testament to her character. And
I want to go to what she actually said, Pastor, if I could just interrupt briefly, just because I want to make sure we have it. But she basically said today that Trump's behavior was, quote, a brazen invitation for something like this to happen, just so our audience is familiar. Again, I brought it up earlier, but I just wanted to clarify that. Please continue, Pastor.
Well, basically, she was saying that's what he gets. And she's almost gloating in it. But once again, that's Nancy, so we're not surprised. She's running true to form. She reveals her true character by making those statements. And however, you know, the nation should be united at this time. We need to put aside petty partisan politics and unite in prayer, lifting up the President of the United States. He is the leader of our country. We need him to be in good health. There's a scripture in the Bible says, if you smite the shepherd, the sheep will scatter. We're also implored in the Bible to pray for those that are in authority over us, because all authority is ordained by God. We believe God put Donald Trump in this office. We pray that God will protect, preserve, and provide for him during this time. He's a robust guy. He's always in great spirits, so I have no concerns about that. And I think he'll lick this. I think he'll come out of it fine. I think he'll show up for the next debate because he's a gamer. He doesn't want to miss that debate. He's anxious to debate, so he'll do whatever he has to do, take whatever precautions he needs to take whatever steps necessary to, for a speedy recovery, and then he'll be right back in the game.
Pastor, I have to ask you, though, there's been a lot of criticism on the left, a lot of people playing that clip over and over again of the president with his exchange with Chris Wallace during the first debate, somewhat seemingly mocking Joe Biden, his opponent, for wearing a mask, a large mask, as he described it. Could that work against him if, in fact, we do see a second presidential debate?
I don't think so. It hasn't been scientifically proven that wearing a mask will prevent you from getting the COVID-19. I remember when Keisha Lance Bottoms, the mayor of Atlanta, contracted COVID-19, and she wore a mask. Her husband wore a mask. Her entire family was wearing masks. As many people that wear a mask catch it as many people that don't wear a mask. I'm not downplaying it. I'm not trying to dismiss the implications or the seriousness of mask wearing, but there's no evidence that a mask or lack of a mask contributes more or less to contracting COVID-19. The president and his entourage all had masks on when they arrived. I was in the back with my mask on and I greeted them. They put their mask on again as they left. They took their mask off during the debate for optics' sake, but otherwise he had his mask on and before and after the event.
Robin, again, and now that I've mentioned what Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi had to say, there's been a huge outpouring of support for the president. On the flip side, there's also been a lot of criticism. Nancy Pelosi's comment could be seen as criticism, but could that also work against your party as well?
Of course, Miranda. It's the last thing in the world that we need right now are Dems, my party, saying, I told you so, or giving you gotchas. And look, I'm actually glad that the president said that during that debate, because it puts to rest this crazy conspiracy theory that he's lying about actually having this in order to get out of the next debate. He would never have said that about masks if he were to turn around 2 days later and fabricate a story that he did have this, which is just absurd on its face.
Yeah, I also, again, there's so many questions that we have right now. The president and first lady, as I mentioned, will remain quarantined. The president experiencing mild symptoms, according to his chief of staff, Mark Meadows. But there's also concern out there for the president's Supreme Court nominee, Amy Coney Barrett. She was in contact with the president. We still don't know if she has been tested or not. But that could potentially cause some issues because they were expecting to vote on that October 12th. Robin, what do you predict will happen?
That is a huge concern, Miranda. And look, as I've said before, a vacant seat actually really does hurt Democrats because it's going to turn out evangelicals just like it did in 2016. So it's a catch-22 for us. And I think it's going to delay this process, which in the end will just turn out the evangelical vote, because right now they really want to overturn Roe v. Wade, and they see this open seat as that means to do so, Miranda.
Pastor, last word to you.
Well, one thing that this incident has done is something we haven't seen since 2015. Well, actually, prior to that, Donald Trump has now become a sympathetic figure. There are those in America that have compassion upon him and his family, sympathy towards him, and prayers sent up for him. And we haven't seen that. That's unprecedented for Donald Trump to be a sympathetic figure. And so if you're going to see anything, any bright side to it, America is praying for him. America is going to God for him, and America is having compassion on him right now.
Pastor Scott, Robin Byro, thank you so much. As always, pleasure to have you on. Have a safe and healthy weekend.
You too, Miranda. Thank you.
God bless you.
God bless you as well. There's so much more to come here on News On. Coming up, we're going to hear your voice. A lot of questions being raised today, and we're going to ask one of those questions. We're also going to hear from some of you who had a question for our viewers. That's coming up in our favorite segment of the day, and that, of course, is Your Voice. You're watching News On right here on Real America's Voice. We'll be right back. Welcome back to News On. I'm Miranda Khan. News of the first couples contracting the coronavirus has sent the stock market futures just tumbling. Dow futures fell more than 400 points just this morning after President Trump tweeted that he and the First Lady tested positive for COVID-19. Again, that was around 1 o'clock this morning. NASDAQ and S&P 500 futures also dropped around 2%. The U.S. government reports that the U.S. economy added 661,000 jobs last month, and the final jobs reports just before the presidential election. It's the fifth month in a row of job additions. That's good to hear. But again, still below the expectations of some economists, and it's the third month in a row of a decline in gains, with the economy adding 4.8 million, 1.7 million, and 1.5 million jobs in June, July, August, respectively. The September reading signals a slowdown, possibly in the economic recovery from the pandemic, although the unemployment rate is now below 8%, and that is the first time since March. A coronavirus stimulus plan House Democrats just passed last night is likely to become law. But talks between House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin, who, by the way, tested negative for COVID-19, continue. The $2.2 trillion package passed the House with no Republican support. Lawmakers are under pressure now to agree on a plan before Election Day, but time appears to be running out. Mnuchin presented a $1.6 trillion proposal Wednesday. Pelosi again saying that number is far too low, but that her disagreement with the White House is more about details and the bill than the top line amount. We now want to get a look at your nationwide forecast from Weather Nation.
Well, very heavy rain has continued to come down across portions of Florida over the last 48 hours. Jensen Beach, this is just from Thursday, picking up about 10.5 inches of rain down through Fort Pierce, Delray, Boynton Beach, 5 to 7 inches. So some significant rainfall there, and that's expected to continue over the next couple of days. Flood watches remain in effect from St. Lucie County all the way down through portions of coastal Miami-Dade County. And a lot of this has to do with the tropics. We're watching this area of low pressure across the Bay of Honduras, which has a good chance to turn into our next tropical depression as it slowly moves to the northern Yucatan and then eventually towards the Bay of Campeche as we head through the end of the weekend and early next week. But in the meantime, a lot of that moisture will be pulled into portions of southern Florida, leading to that chance for flooding and flash flooding. Now, a lot of models do take this up to the north, hooking it back to the west after it moves through the Yucatan. After that, however, we could have potential impacts to portions of the United States. It's a long term, though, so we'll have to wait and see where the models take this after it moves into the Bay of Campeche. But we have to keep an eye on this for potential U.S. impacts towards the middle and end of this upcoming week. Temperature is certainly conducive for development. We have low wind shear, warm temperatures, and that means we could potentially see this become a tropical depression or another tropical system in strength quickly. Expecting heavy rainfall regardless across portions of Florida, western Cuba, the northern Yucatan over the next several days as this system slowly tries to get organized and get its act together. If we do see this turn into a tropical storm, it would get the name Gamma. We're also keeping our eye out on fire conditions across the west, and those fires unfortunately continue to burn, and those fire conditions are not expected to improve over the next several days.
They certainly are not, and unfortunately for the western U.S., we're going to remain on the warm and windy side as all of the cool air following a series of cold fronts will be dipping into the central and the eastern U.S. A lot of spots starting out this morning much cooler than we were at this point yesterday. But the western U.S. stuck under a persistent ridge of high pressure that will continue to bring the warm air to those regions, all while forcing the cooler air into the eastern U.S. So all the way through the weekend, we're going to be seeing these reinforcing blasts of cool air coming in, mostly with dry systems. There will be some scattered showers here and there across the Great Lakes and the Northeast, and then maybe a few showers into Sunday with this developing system coming in. But it does look like a lot of the cool air will be staying north and east. So if you are ready for some more mild temperatures, especially across the south, we will get that this weekend. Fantastic conditions for New Orleans in the upper 70s and low 80s. Low humidity all the way through the weekend and early next week. Atlanta, too, same thing in the 70s. But the further north you go out towards Chicago, temperatures staying in the 50s through the weekend, and those are highs. Warming back into the 60s as we go into Monday. Longer term outlook, though, for most of the country is going to be warmer than average for the next week or so. For more, go to Weather Nation.
welcome back to News On. I'm Miranda Khan. Now it's time for our favorite segment of the day, and that is where we give you a voice. You can join our community platform at americasvoice.news, or you can find us on social media. We are everywhere: Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, Parler, CloudHub, and Twitter. I think I named it all. Simply submit us your comment or question, and we love videos. All right, let's get right to it. Yesterday, we had a video question come in from Mike, and I hope I'm saying your name right. Arakalin, I hope I'm saying it right. He showed us this question yesterday, shared it with us. Let's take a look.
My question is, Joe Biden was in the Senate for 47 years. I'd like to know what he voted for and against while he served in the Senate and or the House, what his record consists of, and the bills that he passed and helped passed over the years.
And Marilyn Carlisle from Twitter said she thinks it should go both ways. Why not Trump's political history as well? She said this: following up to that, what are President Trump's accomplishments during his term? I would love to compare them side by side. Moving on to our next question, we asked you yesterday that the debate commission is wanting to change the rules of the next presidential debate, presuming that we actually do see a second one now. Donald Trump is saying absolutely not, and Joe Biden says yes. So what do you say, America? So we put a poll up on Twitter, and this is what we have so far. Again, we're continuing to monitor this, and you can participate. But most of the people, vast majority of the people, say 93% said nope, keep it the same. Our Facebook poll, a little different though. 43% said yes and 57% said no. Again, you can participate in both polls. All right, so our first comment to this question came from LaMagia Smith on Twitter, saying this: rather than change the rules, the debate commission should put them each in a separate clear booth and control mics and audio. Interesting idea there. Next, Sports Addict from Facebook said this: cancel the debates. There you go. And that could happen. We don't know. XC Glider from Twitter has another idea. He says we need a third category, and to quote, get rid of the debate commission. Thank you. And a boy named Sue from Twitter has an interesting theory on why Trump says he doesn't want the rules changed. He said this: if the president is saying no, I suspect that he actually wants the rules changed, but knows that they will fight harder to change them if he is against it. The rule change will work against Biden's debate style, he says. Thank you so much, Sue. Appreciate that. And we have Debbie Huff saying this: what are the rule changes they want to incorporate? It's better to be a non-biased moderator or moderator from both sides of the aisle. She goes on to say, when the moderator becomes a debater, all bets are off. And finally, Jim Moffitt had this to say.
Hi, Miranda. My name is Jim Moffitt. I'd like to ask your viewers if they are willing to have Joe Rogan be the next moderator for the next two debates on the presidential level, because I think Joe, in his podcast, has provided enough proof that he could be an unbiased moderator in this and not be debating with the president or Mr. Biden himself. Thank you very much.
And thank you. And that has been trending all over social media. Now, the new question of the day, we're asking you this. The president, again, First Lady, testing positive for COVID-19. How will this impact the presidential election, or will it? Let us know what you think. Again, you can find us all over social media, and we look forward to hearing your comments. If you have a sweet tooth, well, we have a treat coming up for you right after the break. We'll be right back. Welcome back to News On. I'm Miranda Khan. Well, as regular viewers to this show, you would know we never pass up the chance to share a good NASA story when we see one. So check this out. You don't have to be a NASA scientist to help discover new planets. How cool is this? NASA has launched a website called Planet Patrol, where members of the public, that's you, can collaborate with astronomers to hunt for new worlds, seek out new civilization, and boldly, sorry, I digress. They'll be sorting through images collected by NASA's Transiting Exoplanet Survey Satellite, or also known as TESS. That's a mouthful. Over the course of a year, TESS captures hundreds of thousands of snapshots, but it's just too many for scientists to examine without help. And computers sometimes, well, they fail to determine potential planets from imposters. So that's where you come in. You can answer questionnaires and sift through images to help researchers narrow down the list of potential planets. Love that. All right, donut lovers, here's a story for you. Krispy Kreme is celebrating Halloween with its new crop of donuts. I love this. The donut chain released what they call scary sweet monster donuts. Those are cute. The treats are designed with 3 classic monsters in mind. The Frankenstein monster, of course, a werewolf, and a vampire. Vampires are always my favorite. The new donuts will go on sale Monday. The White House became the Pink House last night. The chosen lights honor National Breast Cancer Awareness Month, which is October, and that looks absolutely beautiful. According to the White House, an estimated 276,000 Americans will be diagnosed with breast cancer this year, and more than 42,000 will likely die from the disease. But with early detection and treatment, there is a 90% 5-year survival rate for women diagnosed with breast cancer. So be sure and test and do those self-tests as well. Ben & Jerry's wants you to talk about racial inequality and criminal justice reform, and it's doing that by doing what the ice cream maker does best. Introduce a new flavor. This looks so good. Yeah. Justice Remixed is a cinnamon and chocolate ice cream, if that was enough, with cinnamon bun dough, wait for it, and fudge brownies. 0 calories, just kidding. Why those flavors? Why not? The company quotes co-founder Ben in saying that it's easier to talk about difficult issues over a scoop or two. Maybe they should try that in Congress. Portion of the proceeds from the new flavor will support the Advancement Project National Office's Free and Safe campaign. That sounds awesome. The company is now owned by a mega corporation. It has retained its commitment to community values. And while we're talking about food, because, well, we're big foodies here at this show, we'll leave you with this kind of strange story. Whether you hate it or love it, fall wouldn't be complete without pumpkin spice. But on your turkey? Yeah, the Honey Baked Ham Company is testing out a pumpkin spice glazed turkey breast. You can get one during the month of October if you're in a select U.S. city. The company says the flavors will add some seasonal flair, if you will, to its traditional sweet and crunchy glaze. Easy for me to say. It says you can choose between roasted or smoked varieties. I'm not sure about that, but I'm pretty adventurous, so why not? I would try it. I just want to leave all of you today by saying, on behalf of Real America's Voice News, our team here at News On, really everyone here with this network, our prayers and thoughts go out to the President and First Lady. Again, they were diagnosed with COVID-19. The President made that announcement about 1 o'clock this morning on Twitter. We are wishing them a swift recovery. Again, thoughts and prayers with you, and we'll continue to follow this developing breaking story throughout our network. And that will do it for this edition of News On. As always, you can follow us on social media and our own community page, which you can find on our website at americasvoice.news. And be sure and answer our question again today. We're asking you how this, or if it will, impact the election, the debate, Amy Coney Barrett's confirmation hearing. Again, they're supposed to be starting that October 12th. We want you to weigh in on this. You could do so by going to our social media pages and sharing your voice. Have a great and safe and healthy weekend. We'll see you back here Monday.